Hello and welcome to Slightly Seasoned, the show that just gives you a sprinkling of opinion. Here we don't like to shove things down your throat, unless of course you like it that way. If you're here for hard-hitting and expert opinion, well, I suggest you look elsewhere. But if you can't be bothered, well, welcome. The world is currently being swept away in Resident Evil mania. Earlier this year, we saw the release of Resident Evil Requiem, the 9th installment in Capcom's beloved gaming franchise. And more recently announced was the latest RE remake, this time of the 2000s classic Code Veronica, now to be titled Resident Evil Veronica. And to top off all this Resident Evil palooza, we have a brand new spanking Resident Evil movie, because 8th time truly is the charm. It very well could be, as Zach Cregger steps into the director's seat. He's well known for directing Weapons and Barbarian, two of the best horror movies I've seen in recent memory. It's a pairing that I've been very excited to see to come to fruition, and that excitement only grew when the first trailer was released. It grew to insanity mode level, and I say insanity mode level for one reason and one reason only, because it is fucking infuriating.
Oh, Alfred, you cross-dressing freak!
My frustration lies with the fans. People who believe that this movie, Resident Evil, should not be called Resident Evil. Why don't people think this should be called Resident Evil? Well, I think it's similar to why people think the Earth is flat. Basically, they just don't like listening to logical reason. But I must be fair, with a fan base that passionate and that dedicated, well, there were always going to be critics. The only strange thing is that everyone who says that this movie shouldn't be called Resident Evil still thinks it looks like a pretty decent movie. So let's take a look at some reasons that people are calling for a name change. Firstly, there is a lot of pushback to the faithfulness of the lore. New story, new characters, a new part of Raccoon City. Zach Cregger has made it pretty clear that he intends to differ from the source material of the games. Sure, it's set in Raccoon City and it's supposed to be taking place at the time of the outbreak in Resident Evil 2, but Cregger is very intent on delivering his own unique story. Which is fair. Resident Evil is a franchise that's done a lot of growing, a lot of evolving. Resident Evil 7 in particular reinvented the franchise. It stepped into a whole new perspective, a whole new setting, followed whole new original characters. So it's nothing Resident Evil hasn't done before. But to be fair, that is the game franchise. In the case of the movies, fans have had to sit through 7 very deadly sins.
What's in the box? What's in the fucking box?
When you set the film in Raccoon City and you set it concurrently with the timeline of those games, well, fans are definitely going to be nitpicky. Take, for instance, the weather.
Our driveway's snowed in.
Old Man Winter!
Several shots of the new trailer clearly show that it is snowing, an atmosphere unfamiliar to games 2 and 3. I'll admit it's odd, but I don't think it's anything worth complaining about, and I certainly don't think it means that Cregger has no understanding of the Resident Evil franchise like people might be suggesting. There could be a very good explanation for the snow, or maybe there isn't. Either way, I don't think what determines a good Resident Evil movie should be based on the weather. What I really think pissed fans off were 2 sets of comments made by Zach Cregger in an IGN interview, basically a trailer breakdown of the Resident Evil trailer.
I wouldn't call this like a zombie movie necessarily. I'm a little fuzzy on the timeline of when the nuke drops versus the day Leon, sets foot in the police station.
Yes, Resident Evil fans were sent into a flurry of rage and dissatisfaction with these rather small and insignificant comments. I say small and insignificant because, well, that's exactly what they are. There's no doubt that Resident Evil and zombies go together like peanut butter and jelly. But peanut butter can go with so many other things. There's honey, bananas, Worcestershire sauce. It's a particular taste. Look, I get it. It's Raccoon City and you need a zombie outbreak, which looks like that is the case. It looks like there's zombies and there is outbreaking, but you can't tell me just because Cregger says that it's not necessarily a zombie movie that should determine whether this makes it a Resident Evil movie. Cregger says it isn't necessarily a zombie movie. He says necessarily because, well, there are zombies in it, but they're just not the main focus. And to be fair, Resident Evil isn't necessarily a zombie franchise. I'd say it's more survival horror. Now, fans might not necessarily agree, but I necessarily necessarily don't give a fuck. Now the second comment, fuzzy with the timeline. I'll admit, pretty poor choice of words when you're making a film for a franchise with a fan base so passionate and loyal as Resident Evil. But I will say that his fuzziness with the timeline really has no impact, as that timeline has nothing to do with this movie. Perhaps it does technically, as these events are happening concurrently with those events, but we're not focusing on those events, we're focusing on these events. What's frustrating is that these comments are a very small part of this video. There's still 11 minutes and 30 seconds worth of other comments that solidify what Zach Cregger is doing with this movie and how he's going to make it feel like Resident Evil. Shall we dive into those comments? Now, that same trailer breakdown that was released by IGN, it was a rather insightful video where Cregger clearly broke down the intentions and goals with this movie. Cregger states that his rule for this movie was to try and make a film that resembled his experience when playing the games. He goes on to say, it's not canon in that I'm not using the characters. It's canon in that it lives in the day of reckoning in Raccoon City. So there you go. Cregger isn't interested in the source material of the games. He even admits that they're done so well in the games, he sees no point in retelling them in a movie. Cregger is interested in the experience and feeling of playing a Resident Evil game. Something I believe is much more interesting to explore. And let me tell you, the key points that he tells you in this trailer breakdown are guaranteed to soil the pants of any hardcore and open-minded Resident Evil fan. Soil in a good sense, of course. Firstly, the rhythm of the games. We all love a good rhythm, don't we? It's satisfying, it's flowing. A good rhythm can have you pulsating for hours. Each Resident Evil game masterfully puts you in a rhythmic tune of pure, intense fucking adrenaline. Increasing horrors and set designs becoming more ghastly, horrific and dangerous as the game progresses. Then you find yourself in a quiet moment. The atmosphere's silence, the loading screen taking effect, and you just know something terrible is awaiting you around that dark corner. It's addictive, and its feeling is much associated with Resident Evil. I'm not a big replayer of games, but the rhythm of Resident Evil makes me want to play that game over and over again, and right after I've finished. Cregger also talks of incorporating the visual style of the games into this film. He talks of how they had a steady cam looking over the shoulder of Austin Abrams. When he looks right, the camera swings right. When he turns left, the camera swings left. He even mentioned that there's a few first-person moments in reference to Resident Evil 7 and 8. It's strange that nobody would complain about this, as there is no first-person action in Resident Evil 2 or 3. But to be fair, that would be a little unfair to complain about. It'd kind of be like complaining about whether it's snowing or something. I went there. Cregger also talks about the feeling of resource management, health, weapon graduation, all fundamental parts to Resident Evil. What I really think is important though, and Cregger talks about this, is his style. He talks about how he loves to show a character walking through a hallway or linger on a shot of a doorknob twisting open. Cregger has done this, and he's done this very well in his previous films. So Cregger and Resident Evil are a perfect match. His tone and style fits perfectly. I felt they were a good match before I saw this trailer, but when I did see this trailer, when I heard his comments, well, boy, oh boy, I really felt it. I really felt that these two things were two long-lost lovers finally uniting. But of course, this interview goes on for 12 minutes, and well, I can barely get through a 15-second TikTok video. A lot of people just watched the trailer, and they felt that they didn't really get a Resident Evil feeling to that 2-minute trailer. They just thought, sure, it does look like a good Zach Cregger movie, but to call this Resident Evil would be unnatural, embarrassing, foolish. And look, each to their own. But I am each, and I am on my own, and I am telling you, that trailer, that Resident Evil trailer, you better believe there was evil residing.
No way, Leon.
Way.
There are a lot of moments in that trailer that Cregger mentions are Resident Evil coded. There's the shot of Abrams finding a shotgun, which he finds is empty, followed by him frantically searching the drawers, which of course are also fucking empty. There's the set of keys attached to a dead body that's dragged away as Austin Abrams tries to reach them, immediately reminding me of the pure hell you have to endure in certain Resident Evil sequences, all for a set of keys that unlock a door that I am very much not dying to go into. Cregger said there's probably 3 or 4 of those moments where Austin Abrams' character has to go through fucking hell to get keys to unlock another area. There's the shot of him jumping in the sewer, the lingering and looming presence of what appears to be Stellan Skarsgård and Dune. It was a moment that I think leaned into that rhythm that Cregger was talking about of increasing horrors. I loved the moment of Abrams running through the city as the zombies fall from the sky. It reminded me of the chaos at the end of Resident Evil 2 remake, running through the self-destructing lab as chaos just flies at you, but you got to escape. Something I've seen more recently, and something that I've seen fans a bit more warm towards, was that scene of Austin Abrams shooting a padlock and missing point blank. Look me in the eye and tell me that is not a Resident Evil moment. I'm deathly excited for the Resident Evil movie, and to be honest, I'm just thrilled to be a Resident Evil fan in this Resident Evil renaissance that is currently happening. Whether you think this movie deserves to be called Resident Evil or not, well, it doesn't honestly really matter because it's going to be called that. All I'll say is that Cregger gets it, and he's the man for the job. It's as simple as that. And frankly, I think fans should be grateful that a director of this caliber and talent is making a Resident Evil movie. The lore, the characters, and the stories of the Resident Evil games are fantastic. I have a deep love for all that, and I'm excited for the games to further explore that lore. But I think the primary reason that these games are so loved by people is the feeling that they evoke. The adrenaline, the terror, the unknown. The games are such a roller coaster of emotion, and I think the feeling of Resident Evil is a much more interesting thing to explore in film. And if you don't agree, we can all just sit back and watch Welcome to Raccoon City with a gun in my mouth. Anyway, thank you for letting me season you slightly. Oh, that sounded weird. Catch you on the flip-flop.